12 and 13. Chapter 4 deals with ethics and business decision making. Chapter 12 deals with a major law in American society called the law of torts. Chapter 13 deals with a subject that's close to the heart of every business owner, and that is products.
It's what?
Products.
Product.
More specifically, product liability. In other words, if somebody takes your product and gets hurt by it, are you liable? Well, that's chapter 13. I want to talk about and introduce to you chapter 4 this evening, which is a kind of subject that always triggers a lot of interesting response. Just because that not all of us think the same way about the same thing. And so I'm going to make some introductory remarks, and then it's your responsibility to do some assigned work and read chapter 4, and also read chapter 12 and 13 before that. I wish I was a fly in a wall and could have been in the room where the initial discussions were being made by the top level people in Wells Fargo when they were devising this plan to what was their main reason for doing it? What they did was they came up with a plan that would, where their representatives, whether it be managers or the lowest guy in the poll, would try to get new customers on their credit cards and accounts. And I guess by doing that, it would have some effect on the business. The businesses of the company, and the people, if they met through quotas, they would get probably some bonuses. Certainly those in management, if the team under them met the quotas, they would get some bonuses, and they did get. By the way, did you read today that some of them are giving back substantial amounts of money? The top guy, Trump, he's giving back like $42 million.
He got $125 million.
Yeah, but he's giving back $42 million.
So he stole the other $80 million?
Well, he's giving back. Listen to me. It's not over, okay? But it's at least a beginning. And the lady that was in charge of the division where this whole thing was created, she's also giving back a substantial amount in the millions of dollars. Now, obviously, there's a reason for doing that is because Mr. Trump has to go back to face a committee in a few days. And he's already faced another committee that was asking him why they hadn't clawed back some of that money they paid to some of their top people, and they hadn't done it. And so now at least they can go back to the Canoe Committee and say, well, we have begun the process of clawing back some of that money. But be that as it may, what were they thinking? And what was the motivation or the main purpose of devising this business plan? If you take enough business courses, you're going to take some courses that deals with devising business plans. And so let's just ask the question, what's the main purpose of any business?
To make money.
To make a profit, to make money, okay? And so obviously, in the banking industry especially, 5 years ago, there was a lot of pressure on the banks to be able to make money, especially make up money that they were no longer able to make because of the Dodd-Franklin Act, which told them they no longer can sell insurance, can't sell real property anymore. They can't engage in the businesses that they were doing and making money. And so obviously, and in a very well-intended manner, nothing wrong with making money, that's what all businesses do. um, they came up with a plan. And that plan was implemented all the way from, we don't know how high it started, that probably is yet to come. But we know that there was a lady specifically in charge of the plan, and it filtered down through the bankers. They call them bankers, they're just people that work for the bank, especially those who sell people on the idea of setting up a new account or getting a credit card. And a lot of them were phony. They were required to meet a quota of 10 new accounts a day. And pressure was put on the low-level employees to do that. Since this practice began to be questioned, about 5,300 of them have lost their jobs. And the first lawsuit was filed today in Los Angeles by an employee of the bank, contending that he or she was wrongfully terminated by the bank, and they're seeking money damages. Now, obviously, there's going to be a lot more of them. Eventually, it's going to be considered a class action suit, and yes.
Wasn't it already considered a class?
What?
Wasn't it already considered a class action?
Pardon me? I don't know that it's already, it was just filed today by 2 people. I don't think that's been,
Oh, they hadn't been heard.
no. That's coming, that'll be coming. And eventually, most of them, if not all of them, will be part of the class, and then this action will be brought against the bank, and before it goes to trial, the bank will settle the matter, pay a lump sum amount of money, and then whoever's in charge of the class will then divvy up the money between the bank, and we probably won't learn anything more than we already know. Yes.
If their acts have already been found to be fraudulent, how come nobody's being charged with fraud?
It's too early. Doesn't mean they're not going to be. The question is, they haven't decided who was doing the fraud, okay? Suppose you were one of those employees at the bank, making $35,000 a year and with the opportunity to make an extra $1,000 a month. All you had to do was sign up 10 new accounts. Now, you also knew that you were not getting 10 new accounts in legitimate, or at least in the way that you would feel comfortable with, or would you? Suppose you're one of those employees, the pressure is on you to sign up 10 accounts and you're not making your quota. A couple of other employees around you are making quotas every time. And you don't understand why, because you're working hard at it and you're just not getting the people to respond to you. You talk to one of the employees that's making the quota and they tell you, hey, no big deal, just phoning things up. Just, open new accounts, give them phony names and phony numbers and phony PIN numbers, and just go ahead and do it. What's your dilemma?
Basically lying about the whole thing.
What's your dilemma? Do it or don't do it? Well, who says? There are already 2 of them that are doing it. Apparently, they didn't pay much attention whether it's ethical or unethical. And by the way, the bank manager, whoever's in charge of this whole program, is supporting you. In fact, the matter is, weekly, you're having meetings telling you gotta do better, you gotta do better. To eventually, to a point where you decide to cross your line. And you do it. And the bank thinks it's great. They even give you a bonus because you do it. And before long, you're signing up all of these phony accounts and it doesn't bother you one iota. Or doesn't. Okay, I just want to leave that right now because there are a lot of answers, but these are individual questions. But let's start with the idea that it's the goal of every business and it's a legitimate goal. Nobody says it's wrong. The purpose of a business is to make money, and more specifically than that is to make a profit. All right? Now, the authors of the book, in addition to maybe a page or 2 that they put in the front of every chapter, give us a whole chapter in chapter 4 dealing with the subject of ethics in the business decision making. And this ethics in the business decision making can be found at every level within the business. And there may be a day that some of you are out and you're employed and you are assigned a task to decide whether a particular action that the company wants to take is ethical, at least part of that decision. And so the authors of the book provide some material dealing with the question of how ethics has even creeped into the area of business at all. Because you see, back when business first started, I mean, it was gung-ho, make your money as much as you can, and it was being done. And the people were benefiting by being employed, and the owners are being, benefited. And the point of it is that the business should use its resources and whatever it can in order to be profitable. And the shareholders loved it. The only restraint on any business in our country is one thing. What is the primary purpose? We've already talked about this, right? Okay, what's the main restraint of business when trying to accomplish the purpose? What do you think?
Laws,
Yes.
regulations?
Law. L-A-W. The law. Now, all of you know what the law is today. All of you know how it's unique in America. All of you know what the law in America creates. And the point of it is that when it came to the business activity, which, by the way, has always been the engine that runs our economy. Nothing in government can ever produce the kind of results that business can in our economic life. Very few things the government does ever produces anything economically. It just doesn't. But business has always been the engine that runs our economy, and the only restraint on that engine has been the law. So the question over here might be a little duplicate, but what is the standard when deciding whether an activity a person or a business is about to engage in is legal?
The law.
The law. What are the sources of the standard? What are the sources of the standard? The standard is the law. In engaging in any business activity, so what are the standards? Anybody? Let's just start in the order that I've talked about now for 5 weeks. Constitutions, legislative bodies, courts, administrative agencies. That's the only thing that creates law in our country, and the sum of it equals the law. And so it's the standard that business is to operate under in order when engaging in its primary purpose, and that is to make a profit, to make a profit. In other words, leaders in American business could do anything in pursuit of the goal so long as what they did was legal. So how would a business owner know? Or how would you, if you are assigned the task in your little committee or group, to not only find out whether something you're about to do is ethical, but also find out what you would do if something's legal? What would you do to find out if this project that the company wants to do is actually legal?
Research the law.
Ask inside counsel.
You do that. Pardon me?
Ask the inside counsel of the company.
Exactly. Some big companies have a whole big department of lawyers who just do that. And they advise other parts of their company as to whether a particular activity is going to be legal. If you're an individual and you're about ready to engage in some kind of activity and you want to know whether it's legal or not, who are you going to go to?
Law library.
That might be one place, but more than likely, you probably should be going to a
Lawyer.
lawyer. A lawyer that's familiar with the kind of business activity that you're about ready to engage in. Maybe you're comfortable enough to Google up the law and figure it out yourself, or you can go to the law library and try to do that, or you can hire a lawyer if you don't happen to have a lawyer on retainer or on staff at your business. But you better do that before you start engaging in your activity, because you might get burned not too far into the activity by somebody coming along and saying what you're doing is illegal. And now, if what the business is doing or what you're doing, and I don't mean you personally, but be you as a person doing it, what might happen to you or to the business if you're found breaking the law?
In prison?
Can you read that? Punished. Punished. Now, it can be punished in many different ways. If something is illegal, the punishment might be a fine. The punishment can be as bad as putting you out of business, shutting you down. If you're found in violation of laws created by the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, and your business is creating a lot of, over the limit as far as the smog and all of that activity is concerned, the air, it could very well be shut down until you get yourself a new way of doing business to make your air cleaner that you're producing, or the footprints that you're imposing upon American society. They can shut you down. In some cases, the employees or the owners of the company can actually be charged with crimes and go to jail. Well, in other words, a business has been able to seek its primary goal, and that is making money, so long as it stays within the rules of the game, which means the law. If the activity of the businesses are found legal or found to be illegal, as defined by the law, then the business, the lenders, the operators can be held accountable and be punished. Does the law serve as a fairly good standard for keeping people legal? In other words, does it keep you from doing something illegal? All the time? Most of the time?
No, your ethics and morals do.
I'm talking about the law. If something is illegal, should you just go ahead and break it anyway? Well, you're saying that because you don't want to sound like you're a lawbreaker. We're all human, We know we break the law, and sometimes we do it intentionally. But most of us don't, okay? Most of us recognize the law and stay within the limits of the law because we know that in doing so, we've eventually accomplished the goal of the law, and that is, what? The purpose of the law?
To achieve justice.
No.
To create rights and
Maintain
duties.
social order and control. And so you're willing to comply with the law in order to be a part of that. There are some people that just won't do that. They just constantly thumb their nose at the law and go their merry way. Sometimes they get caught, sometimes they don't get caught. We see them every day, don't we? You're driving 70 miles an hour and people are always passing you. We see them every day. There are some people and businesses who always seem to be trying to find ways to get around the law. around, they like, almost like living on the edge, in between the law and doing something illegal. They hire lawyers. Businesses hire lawyers to find ways to either comply with the law or to get around the law. They hire accountants to do the same thing. They hire them to keep them out of trouble, and they hire them when they get in trouble. Why would a person decide to go ahead and break a law, and maybe I should say, why would a business decide to go ahead and break a law when they know that there's a risk if they get caught, there's going to be punishment?
The reward is greater than the risk.
That's exactly right. And what's the ultimate reward?
Money.
Money. Money. Remember, even so, what I just said is true, it is still the law in America that maintains the social order and control, even over businesses in our society. With that in mind, that part called the law, now I want to come to the subject matter of Chapter 4. Now we come to this whole new subject that business leaders and owners must try and deal with, and it's called social responsibility. Sometimes it's called corporate citizenship. This is a brand new standard. It hasn't been around more than 10 or 15, 20 years now. Though it's kind of been brewing in the works even longer than that, but in terms of it actually being a viable aspect of the business life in America, it has been relatively short. As I say, it's a new standard, in addition to the standard that that the business already has to comply with, which is, what's the standard that they?
The law.
The law. Now we're going to add a second standard to businesses and to perhaps even to you and I, and that's called the social standard. But this is really more applicable to business now. In addition to the law, and it in many ways creates a direct and major conflict for the business leaders in the fundamental effort of accomplishing the goal of making a profit. It gets in the way. It makes it difficult to do. Social responsibility actually goes beyond what is legal. If something is illegal, then there's no reason to worry about talking about social responsibility. We're talking about things that are legal under the law, but are still imposed upon the business as a social responsibility. It raises issues of ethics and of values of a community in which the business is doing business, which can actually affect the ability of the business to make a profit. Sometimes the business has to shut down. Some of the areas of social responsibility that have been imposed upon businesses from outside sources are the Civil Rights Act of 1964. This created a whole set of new standards imposed upon businesses in dealing with employees and unions. Another example would be the employee and safety, which includes different forms of retirement plans, or used to. They're kind of going away, and not as much emphasis is being put on those. Consumer protection. There's been a lot of social responsibility on protecting the consumer when makers of products are required to put labels on their products, warning of use and side effects, and to pay money to fund campaigns to educate consumers who might misuse their product. Smoking, gambling. Those are not legal. Those are not laws that make it illegal not to have those things on there. Those are rules and regulations that deal basically with making something unethical if you don't do it that way. Environmental concerns and this carbon footprint idea all deal with social issues, not with legal issues. And wellness programs for the employee, trying to get the employee to stop smoking, stop drinking, stop eating, start walking, start using the gym. And while the employer cannot punish an employee for being overweight, it can award an employee for losing weight. How many of you have ever taken a class where the principal subject is ethics? Just one, two, okay? Now, it's not uncommon for colleges to teach one or more courses on the subject of ethics. And today, businesses have developed their own sources for the new employees, or new courses for employees to take, dealing with the subject of ethics. They have written their handbooks dealing with ethical standards, not with legal standards, but with ethical standards. They have policy manuals that include those standards, and even the college here, in its handbook, has a section dealing with ethical matters, sometimes called honesty standards. So what is ethics? What is an ethics or an honesty standard? First of all, it's a chapter in a big book. The big book is entitled Philosophy. And in this book called Philosophy, there are many chapters, one of which is entitled Ethics. This ethics chapter deals and involves a study of the morals of a society. The morals of a society. Ethics is the name given to the activity that studies the morals of a particular society. Notice, the society may be as big as the whole nation, or it may be as small as a family unit. Ethics is described as a reasoning process, underlying reasoning process, by which each person or a business make a decision about what is right and wrong conduct using our moral beliefs and values. Ethics is a reasoning process where we make decisions using our existing moral beliefs about conduct or behavior or action. We all have a set of values. Would you agree? Or maybe a value system that you use when making decisions in our life about what's right and wrong. These are called moral beliefs. And an ethics study looks at the moral beliefs of a particular society. I suppose they could even look at your moral beliefs, and it could be an ethical study. We use reasoning, but we look at the person, the group, or the business, or the whole society, or a small society, and we try to see what their values are. What are their belief systems? What are their morals? Now, ethics refers to a philosophy of rational basis for fair and honest conduct or action.
Can you repeat that?
Ethics refers to a philosophical rationale basis for what is fair and honest, whether it's in our conduct or action or our behavior. Those are all the same things. So ethics is a reasoning process where we use our already existing value system to make a decision about what's right and wrong. Ethics, while they're related to morals, are not the same. Ethics refer to a reasoning process to try and come to a fair and honest result or decision about an action that you're about to be undertaking. Morals, on the other hand, are the fundamental beliefs about right and wrong behavior, and these are learned. Ethics are reasoned, morals are learned. We use our moral value system as a basis for our ethical decision-making. Where do we as individuals learn our moral beliefs about right and wrong behavior?
Parents.
Let's call that family. Probably the greatest influence on all of us, good and bad, are our parents and how they conducted themselves. You know that, either as a child of a parent or as a parent of a child, children learn much more about what they see you do rather than what they hear you say. Babies even learn from birth what is right and wrong behavior to accomplish their goal, mainly to be comfortable. And if they're not comfortable, they're going to cry, and they get a response. And so we have that Pavlov dog and a bell ringing and a response. Another source of our learned moral beliefs would be our peer groups. Once we get old enough to get out of the family, what, 12 or 13 maybe, and we start having friends. We're on athletic teams. We're in clubs. We're in organizations. We're in gangs. All of these influence our value systems. Is it any wonder that a person who has basically grown up behind bars in prison has difficulty fitting back into a society when paroled or released, because what they have done is all what they have learned in jail just to stay alive? Yes.
Would be religion also be considered?
Well, we're getting to that.
Oh, okay.
Were you impressed by what I just got through saying?
Yeah, but I just wanted to know if religion.
Do you think it's really possible for a person that's been in prison for 30 years, through their whole development, from age 18 on, to really be able to function in a society? Or are they just going to have to be living in a house and being protected and go on welfare?
Yeah,
Pretty much so. It's got to be a real special, unique individual that come out and change their behavior. Their behavior was just staying alive. Maybe that's what we all do.
And then when they get out after 30 years, they get a disability check.
Yes.
Considered like they're gaining.
It could be, well, that's one basis for going on welfare.
Anything.
Yeah, they can just get disability. The truth is, they probably need it. I read an article today, and I'm not saying, well, it probably fits in there. In America today, there are 7 million men that are unworkable. And these are men that just stop working, and they just don't try to work. And they are basically living off of others, wives, girlfriends, government, and they're very happy with that, apparently. And that's a shame that many have. And a lot of them are men who have come out of prisons, who are felons, that are still restricted in many ways, even though they're not in jail, as to what they can do. And of course, a lot of them are those who've involved in drugs. And when it's a serious drug addiction, no matter how hard you try, unfortunately, there's always relapse, and you start all over again. Okay, other systems that we learn from: education systems. Teachers, school staff, students, we learn from and help establish what we believe is right and wrong conduct or behavior. Religion, no question about it. Religious organizations, it's the places like churches, synagogues, mosques that leaders and members spend considerable time in attempting to instill, listen, correct values and moral beliefs into their members. These beliefs tend to be based upon an absolute truth from a higher source, usually God, who has revealed these truths to mankind through a person, and the truths are written into books for use in teaching and the learning process. So in the Jewish religion, what has been written into books, and how do we call that?
The Torah.
The Torah. In the Muslim religion, what do we call that thing that's written in a book, written?
Quorum.
What?
Or,
It's the Quran. In the Christian religion, what do we call it? The Bible, okay? There are only 7 major religions of the world. I suppose we could add to those 3. Hinduism, atheism, there's a couple more. But they all,
Buddhism,
huh?
Buddhism.
Buddhism, okay? They all have some way of having put their inspiration, usually from a man or men, into a written form so that it can be used by the leaders of their churches, their mosques, their temples, whatever, to be able to instill upon the members right and wrong behavior based upon whoever disseminated that idea. Does it make any sense? If you have ever gone to a church, to a synagogue, to a mosque, do you really realize what they're doing to you? I'm not saying it's wrong, but they're teaching you. That's the whole basis of their religion, is to be able to teach people to think a different way, act a different way, do something different than what you've been doing in the world. You know, you're just stop living the old life and start living this new life. And they have to teach you, otherwise you're not going to stay there very long. The only problem is sometimes a lot of us don't know what's going on as it's happening. Sometimes we find out later, wait a minute, that's not what I expected this to be. The news media, it too, has an influence over our decision-making as to what's morally right. The news, the radio, the TV, the talk shows, and now the internet with various social media have a significant influence over people as to what they decide that they're going to do. People are doing things on the social media stuff that they would never have the opportunity to do without it. And they're acting ways that they're just acting out. And then there are role models, R-O-L-E. These are athletes, these are authors of books, these are entertainers, all have influence over what we decide is right and wrong behavior. Now when it comes to ethics and the business decision making, you have to understand that ethics in business environment really isn't any different than in our individual lives. If you are in business or you will in business sometime in some activity, you take yourself and you put it yourself into that business. And when you do that, your set of morals are with you. Okay? And the problem arises is if you're assigned a group activity to try to establish what is ethically correct for this business, your morals may not be the same as mine. And we may have a conflict right within that group. We don't all have the same set of morals, do we? We have probably generally somewhat the same, but there are some differences. And it doesn't mean that what you have is necessarily wrong, but if it conflicts too much with what the rest of the group have, guess what's going to happen to you? You're not going to have much say-so in the group. You might even be excluded. Same thing in society. If you happen to be a part of an organization and all of a sudden you're standing out for professing something that the group thinks is wrong, they're not going to let you stay in the group very long. They'll just exclude you. Owners, managers, workers. Some of these people at Wells Fargo certainly had to have the opportunity to express a moral idea about whether this was right or wrong behavior. And it sounds like they just all went along together, all for the same goal, and that is to make a lot of money. Well, shoot, a lot of bank robbers do the same thing. But that's not just a moral question, it's also a legal question. And I suppose there might be some illegal activity even in this Wells Fargo thing that hasn't yet been really, brought to everybody's attention. So while we talked about what the standards are for the law in making legal decisions, now the question becomes one, What is the standard when deciding a business activity is legal or not?
Ethical.
Pardon me?
You're reading 6?
Yes,
It's ethical.
I'm sorry. Deciding a business activity is legal?
No,
Ethical,
ethical.
excuse me, yeah, ethical, I'm sorry. We've moved from legal, now we're talking about ethical. Because this idea of ethics has come into the business society, it's there, we all have to deal with it. So the question not only is my activity gonna be legal? Now I have to say, is it gonna be ethical? So what's the standard when it comes to deciding whether an activity is ethical or not?
Moral values?
Exactly. Moral belief about what is right and wrong in order to accomplish a fair and honest result.
The problem is how is ethical for a corporation? That's the problem. How do you put the moral value in a corporation?
Well,
That's
it's the people that bring it to the table. And ethical decisions are gonna be based upon the moral beliefs of
for the shareholders.
the owner of the business. The shareholders don't run the business. The people who run the business might be the owners or the president or the manager or a committee. Or maybe you're in charge of the ethical department of the corporation. You write the manual. What are you gonna decide is ethical or not? It's gonna be your moral beliefs. You're gonna write it according to your moral beliefs. What are your sources? We've already gone through those. Your family, your peers, your religious training, your education, things that influence you like the media. Well, what happens if the standard is broken when actions on this decision are being done? So just like it is when it comes to the law, what happens if the law is broken? People are punished. The question now is, what happens if the ethical standard is broken?
People are punished.
In what way? Did you hear what he said back there? The answer is the same way. It's punishment, okay? Now, over here, when it's the law, what kind of punishment might be imposed?
Criminal or civil?
Depends if it's criminal or civil.
If it's civil, then it's gonna be fines, okay? If it's criminal, it could go to jail. Well, what about punishment for an ethical standard? What's the punishment?
Can it be both?
Go to hell?
Can it be both?
Well, I'm just talking specifically about ethical standards. What's the
Loss of
punishment?
business?
Let's talk about you personally, because this also relates to business. If you find yourself engaging in some kind of activity that's immoral, and you're caught, I don't care, by your spouse, by your children, by your employer, whatever.
You're gonna be shamed.
What kind of punishment is gonna come upon you because of that, because of your activity and being caught, breaking a moral code?
Shame.
Did you hear what he said? One form of punishment might be shame. Shame on you. The church stands you up in front of the body and says, shame on you. How do you feel?
Real bad.
Pretty bad.
Mm-hmm.
Embarrassment? You know, adultery is not illegal in this country, but in many little groups, it's still immoral. And if you get caught, not only might you be embarrassed, but you're probably also gonna be ashamed,
Mm-hmm.
okay?
Well, it all depends.
And then when you get caught sinning, oh, I didn't mean sinning, I mean breaking a moral belief. How do you feel? Even if nobody knows about it. Guilt. Yeah, that's what happens. And you know what unresolved guilt will ultimately develop in you? Anger. Anger. Believe it or not, you'll start striking out at people around you and they won't know why and don't understand your action. And the truth of the matter is, you need to be cleansed of your guilt because of your wrongdoing.
Wow.
Well, it's right. Now, in terms of going even worse than these things, you can be excluded from the group.
Damn it.
You can be banished. The gang will kick you out if you have violated their moral standards. Right? The church will kick you out. The business will kick you out. Your wife will kick you out.
The
So most
neighborhood.
of all,
Yeah.
you'll be forced to wear a red heart on your chest. You know what I'm referring to? The scarlet letter. Ridicule. Now tell me this, folks. What's worse? Getting caught breaking the law or getting caught breaking a moral standard?
The law.
Well, it all depends.
That's okay. Some of
Depends
you
who are you
didn't
breaking
answer
the
at
law
all.
for. You're breaking
I could be
the
sent at
standard.
home. I'd rather be sent at home than in jail.
Because the moral,
I've been to jail and you don't want to go back.
Oh, that's right. Well, these people probably haven't, so that, the breaking a moral, rule probably can just make them cry and whimper, and they will just straighten up and fly right the rest of their life.
Well, next day you're,
What?
At least down in the shoe.
Well, watch, if you guys read the news, whatever form you read in,
guy's terrible.
watch about Wells Fargo. Watch how this story
I
unfolds.
don't believe nothing's gonna happen. I know nobody's gonna go to jail.
Watch it though. We already have seen a clawback in some substantial amounts of money. Millions of dollars they're gonna have to pay back. And they have it there. All the company has to do is just take it from them. The president of the company has already voluntarily agreed to pay back $47 million.
That's only to avoid.
Jail.
Yeah, sometimes
The
we're just
guilt,
trying to
the
avoid, right?
ridicule, but it's not gonna work.
But is it any less immoral for the whole Wells Fargo thing?
Well, let's suppose
If you
we-
look at the EpiPen, like
Well.
that whole deal.
So now you wanna put the ethical violations and the legal violations on the whole company? Look what's happened to the shareholder stock value because of this. They ought to be able to sue too, to recover their value in lost stock.
I mean, I know you're a lawyer, but we are definitely a litigious society, so we just sue for whatever the
Yeah.
hell comes to our.
Hey, the attitude is sue for whatever, they'll pay off, won't they?
Right?
They're
But
too big
that's
not
why you
to.
have insurance.
They don't want this thing to go on very long because they can't do business very well without it, right?
Right?
No, insurance isn't gonna cover something that's fraudulent or intentional. But they still pay it, and I guess it just comes out to the bottom line, and they keep doing business anyway. British Petroleum, the oil well leak. Look at the billions of dollars that they've had to pay. Yes.
I have an ethical question in business because this has affected me personally greatly. Mylon
What?
Corporation.
Keep
The
going.
EpiPen.
What?
The EpiPen?
Yes.
How is that ethical? That they start, as soon as their competitor had to recall theirs, it went from being a $100 product to a $600 product.
Well, I agree, and I don't know
Is that not
enough.
unethical?
Okay, she's already testified before Congress, and she's been ridiculed before Congress, and that's good. That's what those congressmen should be doing, and we pay them big bucks to do it, right?
Right?
I doubt very much it has very impact on the person. They still are saying one way or the other. But it does have an impact on the company, and the value of the company is based upon what shareholders think it's worth. And just like with Wells Fargo, we might be to see the beginning of the end of the biggest bank in the world, just because of what they did out of trying to make a business and trying to make profit. Maybe some of us would call it being kind of greedy, but they could very well lose all of their profitability and their stock value. This isn't over. This is probably just the beginning of a major, major thing. And for people like you that are majoring in business, This is gonna be a subject that you're gonna be looking at. Some of them you're gonna be assigned to study what's happening and, you know, come up with some kind of paper on it or whatever. And so you pay attention to as it unfolds. It's kind of like a play. We've only seen the first act, and there are probably at least 2 more acts to come, and maybe more than that. Maybe it's 4 quarters of a football game. So watch it. Okay, now there's 2 things I need to say. At the back of the handout material, there's a true and false section in that copy of that.
I forgot to put them up here.
Okay. In that true and false section, go a couple, you see where that handout material, keep going, yeah, okay, there on that page. You work on that true and false section this week. It won't take you long, just do through it quickly, okay? Also, about 3 pages into this handout material, there
Bless you,
is
sir.
what's called a review. A review. Into the whole handout, about 3 pages into the handout material. See where it says review, 2 pages maybe. I want you to work on that. Now that review material deals with some subjects that I haven't talked about, but I will talk about next week, finishing up this particular chapter. And after you've done those 2 things, I want you to read over on at least chapter 12. Figure out what a tort is. And it's not a pastry. Or it's not a big sandwich called a torta, which I had a student actually bring to class one day. Wow, 3 or 4 people could eat a torta. Well, they sell them up here at the little cafe. Okay, thanks for your time. I'm done. I think I got everything covered, so you're
Thank you,
free
sir.
to go. And it's early.
5, really? Nice.